You are not welcome here. Your very existence challenges their twisted beliefs. The grand chandeliers of the Calloway estate glittered like 1,000 suns, casting long shadows over marble floors that had never known a speck of dirt. Ethan Calloway stood near the bar, his tailored suit pristine and his champagne flute half empty. His eyes scanned the room with an air of practiced disdain until they landed on Javier Morales, a man out of place in this world of opulence. Javier's worn jacket and calloused hands screamed, "Intruder," at least to Ethan. He leaned toward his companion, smirking as he said, "Look at him. Did someone mistake this for career day? Because I don't remember inviting any taxi drivers." Ethan's words carried just enough volume to reach Javier, who froze mid-step. The room seemed to shrink around them, the hum of laughter and clinking glasses fading into a suffocating silence. Javier turned slowly, meeting Ethan's gaze with quiet defiance. "You think you own the air we breathe," Javier said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing behind his dark eyes. "But even kings fall when they forget humility." Ethan scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "Humility doesn't pay my bills, Javier. Maybe you should stick to driving people who actually belong here." The tension crackled between them, sharp and unyielding, before Javier walked away without another word. But the look he left behind lingered, a silent promise that Ethan would regret crossing him. Javier stood outside the mansion, leaning against his cab as the cold New York wind bit at his skin. He replayed Ethan's words in his mind, each syllable slicing deeper than the last. It wasn't just about being mocked. It was about being reduced to nothing more than a stereotype by someone who didn't understand what it meant to fight for survival every single day. Inside, Amara Patel watched the exchange from across the room, her jaw tightening with every cruel remark Ethan made. When she finally approached him, her heels clicking sharply against the floor, there was fire in her eyes. "Do you really think someone like you deserves respect after treating people like trash?" Amara demanded, her voice low but laced with venom. Ethan turned, startled by her sudden presence. "Amara, relax. It's just harmless banter." "Harmless?" she interrupted, stepping closer. "That man works harder in 1 week than you have in your entire life. And instead of gratitude or decency, all you can offer is mockery. You're perpetuating the same system that keeps people like Javier trapped while you sip champagne and pretend you're better than everyone else." Her words hit their mark, though Ethan masked his discomfort with a sneer. "Oh, please, don't lecture me about privilege. You've got no idea how hard I've worked to get where I am." "No," Amara shot back, her tone icy now. "I know exactly how hard you haven't worked. Your father built this empire, and you ride on his coattails while looking down on anyone who isn't handed the same golden ticket." For a moment, Ethan faltered, the weight of her accusation pressing down on him. But pride quickly reasserted itself, and he forced a laugh. "Save the soapbox speech for someone who cares." As Amara walked away, shaking her head in disgust, Ethan felt something stir inside him, something he couldn't quite name yet. Doubt? Shame? Whatever it was, it refused to be ignored. Later that night, Ethan found himself alone in his penthouse, staring out at the city skyline. Memories of his childhood flickered through his mind like old film reels. Victor Calloway's stern face looming over him, demanding perfection. The endless lectures about power, success, and dominance. "You're weak if you let anyone see vulnerability," Victor had told him once, his voice cutting like steel. "Power is taken, not given. Remember that." And Ethan had remembered all too well. He'd spent years building walls around himself, using arrogance and cruelty as tools to keep others at bay. But now, standing amidst the ruins of his own making, he wondered if those walls were trapping him as much as protecting him. He thought back to Javier's quiet dignity, the way he hadn't retaliated despite having every right to. It was infuriating and strangely admirable. Ethan poured himself another drink, trying to drown the nagging feeling that he'd underestimated the man. Amara sat in her small apartment, surrounded by stacks of protest flyers and books on social justice. Her phone buzzed incessantly with messages from friends urging her to give up on Ethan, to write him off as a lost cause. but she couldn't. Not yet. She dialed his number, her fingers trembling slightly as the line rang. When Ethan answered, his voice was guarded. "What do you want, Amara?" "To remind you that actions have consequences," she replied firmly. "Mocking Javier might seem harmless to you, but it's part of a bigger problem. One you're contributing to whether you realize it or not." "I don't need a lecture," Ethan snapped. "I already feel bad enough." "Good," Amara said, softening ever so slightly. "Use that guilt to change. Be better. Or keep pretending you're untouchable and watch everything crumble around you." There was a long pause before Ethan sighed. "Fine. What do you suggest I do?" Amara smiled faintly, sensing the first crack in his armor. "Start by apologizing to Javier. Really apologize. Then maybe we'll talk about what comes next." The next morning, Ethan arrived at Javier's modest home, his heart pounding with nerves. He knocked hesitantly, unsure of what awaited him. When Javier opened the door, his expression shifted from surprise to suspicion. "What do you want?" Javier asked bluntly. Ethan swallowed hard, forcing himself to meet Javier's gaze. "I came to say, I'm sorry for what I said last night. It was wrong, and I shouldn't have treated you like that." Javier studied him for a moment, searching for sincerity. Finally, he stepped aside, gesturing for Ethan to enter. "Apologies are cheap," he said evenly. "Actions matter more." As they sat together, Javier began sharing stories of struggle and resilience, of working double shifts to send money home to his family, of facing discrimination daily simply because of where he came from. Each story chipped away at Ethan's carefully constructed facade, revealing the raw humanity beneath. By the time Ethan left, he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't go back to the person he used to be. Whether Javier trusted him or not, Ethan vowed to prove that he was capable of change, even if it cost him everything. Ethan paced the length of his penthouse, the city lights casting long shadows across the polished floor. The memory of Javier's quiet dignity haunted him like a ghost he couldn't shake. "Stop it," he muttered to himself, gripping the edge of the marble countertop until his knuckles turned white. But the voice in his head wouldn't relent. "How dare you treat someone like that?" His father's words echoed louder still. "Weakness is failure. Regret is for the spineless." Ethan clenched his jaw, trying to bury the guilt beneath layers of arrogance and denial. Yet, late at night when the world was silent, the truth bled through, sharp, unrelenting, undeniable. The grand lobby of the Callaway-owned hotel felt suffocating as Ethan strode toward the front desk, his tailored suit a shield against judgment. The concierge, a young woman with sharp features and an even sharper gaze, handed him his keycard without so much as a glance up. "Excuse me," Ethan said curtly, snapping his fingers to get her attention. She raised her eyes slowly, meeting his glare with calm indifference. "I don't appreciate being ignored." Her lips curved into a faint smile, but there was steel in her tone. "And I don't appreciate being treated like I'm invisible just because I work here." Ethan froze, taken aback by her audacity. He opened his mouth to retort, then stopped short. Her words hit too close to home, stirring memories of Javier's quiet defiance. For the first time, Ethan realized how often he had dismissed people like her, with a flick of his hand or a roll of his eyes, as if their humanity didn't matter. He left the lobby shaken, his carefully constructed facade cracking under the weight of her simple truth. Back in his office, Ethan stared blankly at the screen in front of him, replaying the concierge's words over and over. His reflection in the darkened window revealed a man unraveling, his confidence fraying at the edges. "What did you expect?" Amara's voice startled him. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "I didn't ask for your opinion," Ethan snapped, though his voice lacked conviction. Amara stepped closer, her gaze piercing. "No, but maybe you need it. You've spent your whole life thinking privilege makes you untouchable. Guess what? It doesn't protect you from consequences or accountability." Ethan wanted to argue, to defend himself, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he sank into his chair, defeated. Why does everyone keep acting like I'm some kind of monster? Because actions speak louder than intentions, Amara replied softly. If you want to change how people see you, start by changing how you see them. That night, Ethan sat alone in his penthouse, surrounded by remnants of a life built on empty validation. Trophies lined the shelves, awards gleamed under soft lighting, yet none of it filled the void inside him. He thought back to his childhood, the relentless pressure from Victor to succeed, the endless lectures about power and dominance. You're only as good as what you achieve, Victor had drilled into him, and Ethan had believed it, chasing success at any cost. But now, staring at the trophies he once prized, he saw them for what they truly were: hollow victories masking deeper insecurities. For the first time, Ethan questioned everything he'd been taught about worth and value. Could he really change? Or was he doomed to remain trapped in the shadow of his own making? At the office, whispers followed Ethan like a storm cloud. Colleagues avoided eye contact, murmuring behind closed doors about his role in exploiting low-income communities. A coworker named Claire approached him hesitantly during lunch, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan, people are saying things about the layoffs last quarter, about how you pushed those policies forward. Ethan stiffened, his chest tightening. Those decisions weren't mine alone. I was following orders. Claire shook her head, pity flashing in her eyes. Orders don't absolve responsibility. Everyone knows you were the face of those cuts. They're calling you out of touch. And worse. Ethan stormed out of the cafeteria, his mind racing. How could they turn on him like this? Didn't they understand the pressures he faced? Anger bubbled beneath the surface, but beneath that lay something far more unsettling: shame. Victor's announcement hit like a thunderclap during the board meeting. We're acquiring Rideshare Plus next quarter, he declared, his tone leaving no room for debate. It'll streamline operations and maximize profits. Ethan barely heard the rest. His stomach churned as he processed the implications for Javier, for countless small business owners whose livelihoods would be crushed. After the meeting, he cornered Victor in his office. Did you know Javier Morales owns part of a rideshare company? Ethan demanded, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. Victor raised an eyebrow, unfazed. Of course I did. He's one of our best partners. Why do you think I respect him so much? The revelation hit Ethan like a freight train. All this time, he dismissed Javier as insignificant, unworthy of respect. Yet his father, a man who valued results above all else, had seen something in Javier that Ethan had missed entirely. Ethan visited Javier's community center later that week, uninvited but determined to understand. What he found shocked him. Families struggling to make ends meet, children sharing textbooks because there weren't enough to go around. Javier greeted him with cautious politeness, leading him to a cramped classroom where volunteers taught job skills to unemployed workers. This is what your father's acquisition will destroy, Javier said quietly. Not just businesses, but lives. Ethan's throat tightened as he looked around the room. These weren't statistics, they were real people, fighting for dignity in a system rigged against them. For the first time, Ethan saw the human cost of corporate greed, and it sickened him. That evening, Ethan called Amara, his voice heavy with resolve. I can't sit idly by while my family destroys lives. I have to do something, but I don't know where to start. Amara's response was immediate, firm. Start by standing up to your father. If you believe in justice, prove it. Ethan hung up, his heart pounding. Loyalty to Victor Ward with empathy for Javier, tearing him apart. In the end, he made his choice not out of obligation but out of necessity. He couldn't live with himself if he stayed silent. Derek Langston leaned back in his chair, a smug grin spreading across his face as he scrolled through leaked audio clips of Ethan mocking Javier. Perfect timing, he murmured, forwarding the files to every major news outlet. By morning, Ethan's reputation was in tatters. Headlines screamed betrayal, hypocrisy, arrogance. Protesters gathered outside the Callaway headquarters, chanting slogans that cut deeper than any insult ever had. Ethan watched from his window, numb with disbelief. Derek had orchestrated this perfectly, using Ethan's own words to dismantle him. But instead of crumbling, Ethan felt something unexpected stir within him: defiance. Javier sat across from HR, his hands trembling as he recounted the discrimination he'd faced at work. "They told me I wasn't qualified for the promotion," he explained, his voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath. "Even though I've been here longer than most of the candidates." Ethan listened from the doorway, unseen but seething. This wasn't just about Javier, it was systemic, ingrained, pervasive. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. The deck was stacked against anyone who didn't fit the mold of privilege. When Javier emerged, Ethan stopped him. "I'm sorry," he said simply, "for everything." Javier studied him for a moment before nodding. Actions matter more than words. Ethan attended a protest organized by Amara, standing shoulder to shoulder with strangers united by a shared cause. Signs waved overhead, voices rose in unison, demanding justice for marginalized communities. Amara caught his eye, offering a small, approving smile. "Feels different when it's personal, doesn't it?" Ethan nodded, his chest swelling with purpose. For the first time, he understood the weight of systemic oppression and the responsibility he bore to fight it. Late that night, Ethan sat in his penthouse, penning a letter to Victor. Each word felt like pulling teeth, exposing truths he'd buried for years. By the time he finished, tears streamed down his face. He couldn't undo the harm he'd caused, but he could vow to never repeat it. Redemption wouldn't come easily, but it would come, one step at a time. Amara's voice broke through Ethan's despair as they walked along the riverfront. "You think this is hard? Try living it every day. Try waking up knowing the odds are stacked against you." Ethan swallowed hard, guilt and determination warring within him. "I don't know if I can fix what I've broken." "You don't have a choice," Amara replied firmly. "Change isn't optional. Not for people like us." Her words reignited a spark within him, fueling his resolve. No matter how daunting the road ahead, he would walk it. Days turned into weeks as Ethan threw himself into advocacy work, learning from Javier and Amara how to be an ally rather than an obstacle. Progress was slow, frustrating, exhausting, but each small victory fueled his determination. One evening, as he addressed a crowd of protesters, Ethan realized something profound. Redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building a future worth fighting for. Ethan sat slumped on a park bench, his head in his hands, the weight of his failures crushing him. Amara approached silently, her boots crunching against the gravel path. She stopped in front of him, arms crossed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Get up," she demanded. "You think running away will fix anything?" Ethan looked up, startled. "I'm not running. I'm done, Amara. I've ruined everything." Amara knelt down, her tone softening but still firm. "No one gets to quit when they're finally starting to see clearly. You want redemption? Then earn it. Start by apologizing, not just with words, but with actions." Her unwavering belief in him felt like both a lifeline and a challenge. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt something besides shame: hope. The news broke overnight. Derek Langston had leaked emails between Ethan and Victor discussing layoffs targeting minority employees. The headlines painted Ethan as heartless, opportunistic, a villain who cared only about profit. At work, whispers followed him everywhere. Claire cornered him in the break room, her face flushed with anger. "Did you really sign off on those cuts?" she demanded. "I didn't have a choice," Ethan shot back, though his voice wavered. "Derek manipulated everything. He's trying to destroy me." Claire shook her head, disappointment etched into every line of her face. "Choices always exist, Ethan. Maybe you just chose wrong." Isolated and betrayed, Ethan retreated to his penthouse, staring at the city skyline. Derek's betrayal stung, but worse was the realization that no one trusted him anymore, not even himself. Javier answered the door cautiously, his expression guarded when he saw Ethan standing there. "What do you want now?" he asked bluntly. "To say I'm sorry," Ethan replied, his voice trembling, "for what I said at the gala, for treating you like you didn't matter. It wasn't okay, and I know that now. Javier studied him for a long moment, searching for sincerity. Finally, he stepped aside, gesturing for Ethan to come in. Words are cheap, Javier said evenly. Show me you mean it. As they sat together, Javier shared stories of resilience, of working double shifts to send money home to his family, of facing discrimination daily simply because of where he came from. Each story chipped away at Ethan's carefully constructed facade, revealing the raw humanity beneath. By the end of their conversation, Javier offered a tentative olive branch. If you're serious about changing, meet me tomorrow at the community center. We'll start there. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the community center, nervous but determined. Javier greeted him with cautious politeness, introducing him to volunteers and families struggling to make ends meet. One young boy caught Ethan's attention, a wiry kid named Mateo who proudly showed off his math homework. My dad says I'm going to be an engineer someday, Mateo declared, grinning ear to ear. Ethan smiled faintly, then glanced at Javier. He has no idea how hard it'll be for him, does he? No, Javier admitted. But that doesn't stop him from dreaming, or me from fighting for him. In that moment, Ethan understood the depth of Javier's strength, the quiet determination to create opportunities despite overwhelming odds. Their evolving relationship became a testament to forgiveness and mutual respect, challenging both men to grow beyond their preconceived notions. Over coffee later that week, Javier recounted tales of his early days in America, working 3 jobs while learning English, enduring racist slurs from coworkers, and still finding joy in small victories. His voice carried a quiet pride that left Ethan awestruck. How do you keep going? Ethan asked, genuinely curious. Javier leaned back, his gaze steady. Because giving up means letting them win, and I refuse to let anyone take my dignity. Ethan absorbed every word, each story forcing him to confront the privilege he'd long taken for granted. For the first time, he saw the world through someone else's eyes, and it terrified him. Volunteering at the community center became Ethan's new routine. He helped tutor kids after school, served meals at the food pantry, and listened intently to stories of struggle and survival. Every interaction forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about inequality. One evening, as he packed up supplies, an elderly woman stopped him. Thank you for helping us, she said softly. Not many people like you care. Her gratitude hit him like a punch to the gut. I don't deserve your thanks, he admitted, but I promise to keep trying. It wasn't absolution, it was accountability, and it fueled his resolve to advocate for change. Victor slammed his fist on the desk during their heated argument, his face red with fury. You're throwing away everything we've built, all for some misplaced sense of guilt. It's not guilt, Father. Ethan shot back, his voice rising. It's my responsibility. If we don't address the harm we've caused, we're complicit in perpetuating it. Victor sneered. Responsibility won't fill our coffers, son. Humility is for losers. Ethan stood taller, his jaw set. Then maybe it's time we redefine success. Their clash highlighted the generational divide in addressing systemic issues. Yet, Ethan refused to back down, choosing instead to stay true to his evolving beliefs. That night, Ethan drafted a public statement denouncing unethical business practices and pledging to support marginalized communities. Submitting it felt like stepping off a cliff, but also like taking flight. When Victor called, his voice icy with disapproval, Ethan braced himself. You've made your choice, Victor said coldly. Don't expect me to stand by you. Ethan hung up, tears streaming down his face. Losing his father's approval hurt more than he'd imagined, but clarity replaced grief. Dismantling oppressive systems required courage, and Ethan was ready to lead. During a tense meeting, Victor dismissed Javier's suggestions for equitable hiring practices with a wave of his hand. Idealistic nonsense, he scoffed. We run a business, not a charity. Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady. Actually, Dad, fairness isn't idealism. It's necessity. If we want loyalty and innovation, we need inclusivity. The room fell silent as Victor glared at him. But Javier nodded approvingly, offering subtle encouragement. Mediating the ideological divide forced Ethan to defend his stance on justice and reform, even if it meant alienating his own father. Amara joined Ethan on stage at a rally organized by local activists. As protesters cheered, she turned to him, her smile radiant. Together, we can challenge even the most entrenched systems. Her unwavering support strengthened their bond, reminding Ethan that collective action could dismantle oppression. Together, they rallied allies within the community, proving that unity was stronger than division. As Ethan bridged gaps between family, friends, and mentors, he realized that meaningful change required collaboration across generations and perspectives. At a town hall meeting, he addressed a diverse crowd, his voice filled with conviction. "We may come from different worlds," he began, "but our shared humanity binds us. Let's build bridges, not walls. Because equity isn't just a dream, it's a demand." Applause erupted around him, sealing his role as a bridge builder in the fight for justice. Redemption wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Ethan stared at the documents spread across his desk, his hands trembling as he pieced together Derek's sinister plan. Layoffs targeting minority employees, Javier's brother included, were disguised as cost-cutting measures. The sheer cruelty of it made his stomach churn. "This isn't just business?" Ethan muttered under his breath, anger simmering beneath his skin. "This is destruction. Lives are being torn apart for profit." He thought of Javier's quiet dignity, the resilience he'd witnessed in the community center. How could anyone treat people like disposable pawns? The realization ignited a fire within him, a fierce determination to expose Derek and dismantle the system that allowed such exploitation. Ethan stormed into Amara's apartment unannounced, clutching the incriminating files. She looked up from her laptop, startled by his intensity. "Derek's been orchestrating layoffs aimed at minorities," Ethan said, his voice shaking with rage, "including Javier's brother. This isn't personal. It's institutionalized racism masquerading as corporate strategy." Amara rose slowly, her eyes narrowing. "And what are you going to do about it?" "I'm done standing by," Ethan replied, jaw clenched. "If I don't fight back now, I'm complicit. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They're real people with families, dreams, futures." For the first time, Amara saw something in Ethan she hadn't before: conviction. But she warned him anyway. "Taking on corruption isn't easy. Are you ready for the fallout?" Ethan nodded grimly. "I have no choice." The headlines screamed betrayal. Ethan's face was plastered across every major news outlet, labeled as incompetent, arrogant, and out of touch. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls from colleagues distancing themselves, friends ghosting him, and strangers hurling insults online. Alone in his penthouse, Ethan sank onto the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling. He replayed every mistake, the mocking, the dismissiveness, the blind arrogance, and felt the full weight of his failures crash over him. His chest tightened as tears welled up. "What did I expect?" he whispered bitterly. "I built this mess myself." But amidst the despair, clarity emerged. Silence wasn't an option anymore. If he wanted redemption, he had to act. Ethan called Javier late that night, his voice raw but resolute. "I need your help," he admitted. "Not just to fix what I've broken, but to stop Derek before he destroys more lives." Javier hesitated, distrust lingering in his tone. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I finally understand," Ethan replied, desperation edging his words. "I see how systemic oppression works now, and I can't let it continue. Please, give me a chance to make things right." After a long pause, Javier agreed. Together, they began strategizing ways to expose Derek's corruption while advocating for fair labor practices. Inspired by their resolve, Amara joined the effort, bringing grassroots connections and expertise to the table. Ethan stood outside the Callaway Corporation headquarters, surrounded by protesters holding signs demanding justice. Their chants echoed through the streets, drawing attention from passers-by and media outlets alike. A young activist approached him, handing him a megaphone. "It's your turn," she urged. "Tell them why we're here." Ethan hesitated, gripping the megaphone tightly. Public speaking terrified him, but this moment wasn't about fear. It was about accountability. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward. "My name is Ethan Calloway," he began, his voice shaky but growing stronger. "For years, I turned a blind eye to injustice because I benefited from it. No longer. Today, we stand united against systemic racism and exploitation. We demand change." Cheers erupted around him, energizing the crowd. For the first time, Ethan felt like part of something bigger than himself. Inside the boardroom, Victor slammed his fists on the table, furious at Ethan's public defiance. "Do you realize what you've done?" he roared. "You've embarrassed this family, tarnished our legacy." "No," Ethan shot back, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "I've exposed the truth. If our legacy is built on exploiting others, then maybe it deserves to be destroyed." Victor stared at him, disbelief etched into every line of his face. But Ethan didn't flinch. He knew where he stood now, and it wasn't with his father. Later that evening, Ethan addressed a packed auditorium of activists, workers, and allies. "Change doesn't happen overnight," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "But when we stand together, there's nothing we can't achieve. Let's rewrite the rules, together." Applause thundered through the room, sealing Ethan's transformation. Redemption wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And for the first time in his life, Ethan felt truly alive. Ethan burst into the boardroom, his presence commanding despite the storm of emotions raging within him. Every head turned as he placed a thick folder on the polished table, its contents damning enough to shatter reputations. "This ends today," Ethan declared, his voice cutting through the stunned silence like a blade. Derek orchestrated layoffs targeting minority employees, including Javier's brother, for profit. "I won't stand by while lives are destroyed for greed." Victor leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable, while Derek smirked, exuding false confidence. "Careful, son," Victor warned, his tone icy. "Accusations without proof can ruin careers." Ethan met his father's gaze unflinchingly. "Then let's talk about proof." He flipped open the folder, revealing emails, financial records, and testimonies from affected workers. Gasps rippled through the room as the evidence mounted. Tensions crackled like electricity, each word loaded with accusation and defiance. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a reckoning. Derek rose slowly, his charm weaponized as he addressed the board. "Ladies and gentlemen, we all know how emotional Ethan can be. Let's not let personal vendettas cloud our judgment." But Ethan didn't flinch. Stepping closer to the table, he slammed his palms down, leaning in until every eye was locked on him. "Emotional? You call exposing systemic racism emotional? These aren't numbers on a spreadsheet, they're people. Families. Lives you've ruined for profit." He turned to one of the board members, Mrs. Patel, who had always been skeptical of Derek's schemes. "Ask yourself, why would someone go to such lengths unless they had no other choice? Unless the truth demanded it?" Derek's smirk faltered as murmurs spread among the board members. For the first time, doubt crept into their expressions. The battle lines were drawn, loyalty versus integrity, and Victor sat frozen, caught between them. Victor stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound that silenced the room. His face was flushed, veins throbbing at his temples. "Enough!" he barked, glaring at Ethan. "Do you have any idea what you're risking? Our name, our legacy, everything we've built." Ethan stepped forward, his voice trembling but resolute. "And what exactly have we built, father? A fortune soaked in exploitation? If this is the cost of success, then maybe it's time we tore it down." For a moment, Victor looked as though he might strike Ethan. Instead, he sank back into his seat, his shoulders slumping under the weight of an impossible decision. Memories flashed before him, his ruthless rise to power, the sacrifices made along the way, and now, his son standing against everything he represented. Finally, Victor spoke, his voice heavy with resignation. I never thought I'd see the day when my own blood would turn against me. Victor's next words stunned the room into silence. But perhaps it's time for change. He turned to Derek, his gaze cold and unyielding. Your actions have disgraced this company. Consider yourself terminated. Effective immediately. Derek's jaw dropped, his composure crumbling. You can't do this. We've worked together for decades. I can and I will, Victor replied, his tone final. Turning to Ethan, he added, and you? Prove to me that your crusade is worth destroying everything I've built. Ethan nodded, tears welling in his eyes. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. A fragile bridge mending years of estrangement. Together, father and son faced the board, united in dismantling decades of toxic practices. Later that afternoon, Ethan stood outside the Callaway Corporation headquarters, surrounded by protesters holding signs demanding justice. Cameras flashed as reporters jostled for position, eager to capture his every word. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped up to the podium, gripping the sides tightly. His heart pounded as he scanned the sea of faces. Workers, activists, allies, all waiting for him to speak. Today, he began, his voice steady despite the nerves clawing at his chest. We take a stand against systemic oppression. For too long, corporations like ours have exploited marginalized communities, treating them as expendable. No more. Cheers erupted, drowning out the distant jeers of skeptics. Ethan continued, his passion igniting the crowd. We owe it to those we've wronged to rebuild not just our policies but our values. Justice isn't optional. It's essential. By the time he finished, tears streamed freely down his face, mirrored by countless others in the audience. The message was clear. Change was coming, and nothing could stop it. That evening, headlines blared Ethan's transformation across newspapers, social media, and television networks. Praise poured in from activists and critics alike, hailing him as a symbol of hope in the fight for equality. Inside the Callaway penthouse, Ethan sat alone, staring out at the city skyline. Amara joined him silently, handing him a cup of tea. You did it, she said softly. What happens next? Ethan sighed, exhaustion etched into his features. Next, we keep going, one step at a time. Justice doesn't end with one victory. It's a lifelong commitment. Amara smiled, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Then count me in. Together, we'll make sure this isn't just a moment. It's a movement. As dawn broke over the horizon, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. Redemption wasn't easy, but it was possible. And for the first time, he truly believed in the power of collective action to create lasting change. Ethan sat alone in his penthouse, the city lights casting long shadows across the room. The weight of his past actions pressed heavily on his chest as he replayed memories of cruelty and indifference. Mocking Javier, dismissing marginalized voices, perpetuating systems of oppression. He clenched his fists, guilt gnawing at him like a relentless tide. I can't undo it, he whispered into the silence, but I can make sure it never happens again. The realization struck him with brutal clarity. Accountability wasn't about erasing mistakes. It was about owning them. Every life impacted by his arrogance deserved acknowledgement. Every voice silenced by systemic injustice demanded amplification. Though justice remained incomplete, Ethan found solace in the progress they had begun. A testament to resilience, unity, and the power of change. Amara entered the room, her arms crossed as she studied Ethan's expression. Apologies don't fix lives, she said sharply. They're just words unless you back them up with action. Ethan nodded, meeting her gaze without flinching. I know that now. This isn't over, not even close. Dismantling racism takes more than speeches or initiatives. It's a lifelong commitment. Her stern demeanor softened slightly. Then prove it. Keep fighting even when it's hard. Even when the world tells you it's impossible. Ethan stood, resolving burning in his eyes. I won't stop. Not until equality isn't a dream. It's a reality. Their shared determination solidified his role as an ally, cementing the idea that true justice required sustained effort, humility, and courage. Victor sat stiffly in his study, staring at the chessboard before him. When Ethan entered, the tension in the air thickened. Neither spoke for a moment, the unspoken rift between them palpable. Finally, Victor broke the silence. "You've changed," he admitted gruffly. "In ways I didn't expect, and maybe didn't want." Ethan stepped closer, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Change isn't easy for either of us. But if we work together, we can use our resources to uplift others, to build bridges instead of walls." Victor hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Start small. Focus on communities near the headquarters. Let's see where this goes." For the first time in years, father and son shook hands, their fractured relationship mended through mutual respect and purpose. Together, they launched programs aimed at education, employment, and empowerment, blending Victor's influence with Ethan's passion for equity. At the community center, Javier watched Ethan interact with volunteers and families, his skepticism gradually giving way to cautious optimism. Amara joined him, folding her arms as she observed. "He's different," Javier remarked quietly. "Not perfect, but trying. That counts for something." Amara smiled faintly. "He has good teachers. Us." When Ethan approached later, Javier offered a rare compliment. "You're learning. Don't let the lessons slip away." "I won't," Ethan promised, sincerity etched into every word. "I owe it to everyone who's trusted me to keep going." Their bond deepened under Javier and Amara's mentorship, reinforcing the importance of humility and collective effort. Each conversation, each shared experience, strengthened Ethan's resolve to remain steadfast in the fight for equality. The protest outside the Callaway Corporation headquarters drew thousands, their chants echoing through the streets. Protesters held signs demanding justice, their voices united in defiance against systemic oppression. Ethan stood among them holding a megaphone. His presence shocked many, once the face of privilege and indifference, now standing shoulder to shoulder with those fighting for change. "Systemic racism thrives because we allow it," he declared, his voice ringing out. "But not anymore. Today we rose. Together." Cheers erupted around him, cameras flashing as the image of Ethan Callaway, former antagonist turned advocate, spread across the nation. His transformation inspired others to join the movement, proving that allies could emerge from unexpected places. That evening, Ethan addressed a packed auditorium of activists, workers, and allies. "Justice isn't achieved overnight," he began, his voice filled with conviction. "It requires humility, courage, and unity. And most importantly, it requires all of us." As applause thundered through the room, Ethan felt a profound sense of hope. Change was possible when people came together, bridging divides and amplifying marginalized voices. He embraced his role as an advocate, vowing to continue the fight no matter the cost. The final takeaway lingered in the air, a powerful reminder that meaningful change demanded collective action. As Ethan walked off stage, surrounded by supporters, he knew the journey was far from over. But for the first time, he truly believed in the possibility of a better future.